There's two kinds of technology out there that come into aircraft. There's what's sort of additive in that it's not necessarily replacing something. And I think pilots are generally more receptive to things like that.
From AirHeart Innovation Series, this is What Follows with Nate Thuli.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What Follows, the podcast where we explore the people shaping aviation today and the ideas defining what comes next. I'm your host, Nate Thuli. I'm really excited about today's guest, Ben Klein, CEO of Aero, one of the most fascinating companies in modern aviation. Aero is a premium jet service operating scheduled flights between destinations such as Aspen, Sun Valley, Maui, Cabo, New York, and soon Miami. But the company doesn't fit neatly in any existing category. Instead, Aero was created as a new kind of premium aviation experience, blending private terminal convenience, boutique hospitality, elevated design, and scheduled service into something that feels more like a luxury hotel or private club in the sky than traditional airline. And Ben himself is one of the most unique backgrounds in aviation today. He's a longtime pilot, former owner of a 1958 Beechcraft twin Bonanza, and currently type-rated in the Embraer 145 and legacy aircraft. At Aero, he contributes both in the business and on the flight deck, often flying alongside Aero crews as first officer. In addition, to top it off, as if that isn't enough, Ben is also a lawyer. He graduated from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, earned his JD from the University of Michigan Law School, clerked for a federal judge, and still found time to become deeply immersed in aviation. Let's get into it. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
So I want to start off with aviation and just your background and kind of, your journey till now. Where did it start? What got you into this world?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about when was the first spark? And it's hard because it happened so young for me. I know my father wasn't a pilot, but he was into aviation. And so that naturally rubbed off. And I was just, I always say there's two kinds of people. One who, when they fly commercially, gets off the airplane and can tell you what kind of airplane they were on, and the other who has no idea. And my father was the kind of guy who knew. And so he just, came of age with airplanes, right? And so that definitely rubbed off on me. And then at a very young age, I actually remember getting my first copy of Flying Magazine. I was on an airplane. This is when they used to have magazines, in the sort of laminated or within the cover. And it opened up the world to me of general aviation, which I probably didn't know existed. And, there are these small airplanes that we can fly. And that got the bug firmly planted. And then I took my first flying lesson when I was 12. It was something that I pestered my parents about. And then I got another lesson when I was 13. And another lesson when I was 14, and I was just relentless. And my parents saw that I was committed, and so they let me go and do my private, which I got when I was in high school. So it's been a lifelong thing, and just never really stopped.
Right.
Exactly. 12 is it's a great place. I mean, I think I said I took one lesson a year. Then, you're almost not even really tall enough to correctly manipulate the controls. But I certainly think if the excitement's there, why not start? And that, I'm an instructor also. And I think about when do I want to start teaching my kids? And, they haven't shown the same sort of initial passion that I had, but I'm working on it.
There you go. Yeah. Do you recall what aspect of aviation caught your attention? Was there something it unlocked or a type of plane or anything that was kind of igniting that?
I think it was the freedom.
Yeah.
I used to daydream about being able to take people places and go to different parts of the world. So I think it was just the utility almost that really transfixed me. But I like gadgets and machines and was intrigued by the complexity of it. So it was the package, but I think the entree was the freedom that aviation gives you.
I mean, it opens up when you can go from one point to another. And you're not constrained to a grid. You're not constrained to hubs. So that is an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And especially here in the US, I mean, we're fortunate. We have airports all over the place.
Exactly.
And I think what's interesting about the world of GA is not a lot of people realize how many small airports there are, how many smaller areas, how many, destinations you can reach with an airport that's actually pretty close to your house. And another airport that's quite close to where you're headed. That route mindset. Actually, I'd love to unpack that a little bit. Yeah, fascinating. And then so at some point did it become clear to you that aviation was going to be?
I mean, when you're lucky enough to find your passion early, then I think I naturally thought, how can I work this into my life? I remember reading a book about Louis Malle, who's, he's an architect. And he said that Louis Malle's a filmmaker. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the architect. But there was a book called You Say to Brick that he wrote. He's a famous architect. He's from Philadelphia. And he talked about how lucky he was to have taken an architecture class in high school. He just so happened to go to a high school that had an architecture class. And so he discovered his passion and he knew what he wanted to do for the rest of his life, very young. And what a blessing that was. I had the same thing, right? I had this thing enter my life and that I was passionate about from a young age. And everybody's that lucky. A lot of people will try to figure, what is it? Now, that being said, I did take a detour and I didn't initially do it, but it was clear to me. I knew it would always be a part of my life and most likely in a professional format as well.
So that detour, that culmination, I guess I'm in a similar boat. Conveniently, I was at, it's the culmination that sort of happens. And what I've noticed is when you're able to start having that sort of aspirational image come to mind, when you are there, it is a culmination of sometimes many different things that start to really come together, right? And it may be a detour, or it might just be part of the skill set that needed to be built along the way. And you built a pretty significant side portion of that with your legal aspiring pilot into a world of legal, and then now CEO. And that progression.
So, by the way, I agree with, exactly what you said. I use the word detour, but that's probably not the right way to characterize it. Really, the way I think about it, and when I talk to young people about what they want to do, and how they should approach that, there's this concept of wayfinding, right? And actually that applies to, we think about it with aviation, right? It's almost like, you proceed in one direction, you assess where you are, and then you either keep going or you decide to take a different path, and then you assess after that and you go. And so, that's sort of how my career has unfolded with some wayfinding. So to go back to it, I went to law school. We could do a podcast about why I went to law school, but I was somebody who gravitated towards politics, history, also somebody who, like a lot of people after graduating college, wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. And so went to law school, which is, I always tell people, not the right reason to go to law school. A lot of people do it, but I actually loved when I got there. It was a wonderful educational experience for me. In some ways, I found that academic experience, intellectual experience that I had been looking for a long time. I just, my brain works in a way where it's suited to thinking in the way that we're taught to think in law school. So it was great and unexpected in a way. And so I left law school. And when I entered, I don't think that I thought I'm definitely going to go be a practicing lawyer at a corporate law firm. But that's what I ended up doing. And it was a wonderful experience. But I knew very quickly, this is not what I'm ultimately meant to do. It wasn't going to satisfy me for a career. And it was a little bit of luck involved in that the first trial I ever had that I participated in a meaningful way involved an airplane. It was a breach of warranty contract case involving a King Air and an early EFIS, system that the airplane had been retrofitted with. I'm not going to get into the name of the manufacturer or anything like that, but there was a dispute over its ability to communicate with the autopilot that was in the airplane and what the manufacturer of that system had represented, et cetera. That was the nature of the dispute. Small case, which is why I was allowed to be involved as a young lawyer. But for me, it was a real eureka moment, which is, wow, okay, here's when airplanes are involved. This is a lot more fun for me. And I have a unique skill set where I was able to contribute to that in a way that most lawyers wouldn't be able to. Yeah. And so from there, I very deliberately sort of moved my practice to focus more on aviation related work. And in order to do that, I had to start my own firm because just the nature of the work is hard to do in a larger practice. I knew I wanted to do regulatory work, representing, early on, I was representing pilots in FAA proceedings. And so I started my own firm to really try and focus on that sort of work. And so that was a big shift for me. And yeah, from there, I did that. I worked with a lot of great companies as outside counsel in the aviation space. And then in 2018 or 2019, I had the opportunity to go in-house for one of my clients, kicked off the sort of trajectory that I'm on today, where I went from from my initial company to Aero, which I joined as general counsel.
Okay. Wow. Wow. And the culmination there I find really critical too, that, a lot of people get into aviation for obviously a lot of different reasons, but it often centers around the love of flying or the freedom of it, to understanding how aviation happens, that you see that a tremendous amount of it is prescriptive, a tremendous amount of it is procedural or regulatory. And I got to say, it seems like a pretty incredible skill set to be now in a CEO position, but having the mindset, right? And knowing how to navigate what is.
I don't know if it's ever simple, right? They haven't written the regs to be simple in any way. And I always say, like, I certainly haven't memorized the FARs, but it is certainly useful. It's a portion of what I do as CEO, but to have that background and knowledge definitely helps.
Yeah. And I assume you're still flying today then. You still fly?
I am. I'm type rated in the ERJ. We fly at Aero 45. And I try and fly a few times a month. I like to take the milk run down to Cabo. But yeah, it's great. It's a great job perk, but also in the same way that having that aviation regulatory background aids me as CEO, so does being a pilot. Just understanding the operation, what our crews, our frontline employees deal with every day, only makes me better at my job as a CEO.
So Aero, that's what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And it seems like it has you found a really good niche, or this pocket between the gap between what is served by commercial aviation and, a first class opportunity to travel there, and then true private, privately. Is that right? How would you kind of describe where Aero fits?
I think that's exactly right. We fit in the space that exists between commercial first class and purely private charter. And we were created to fill that gap where, frankly, there's no one else even today doing quite what we're doing, which is flying private jets on scheduled routes and selling by the seat. And so we're the brainchild of Garrett Camp, founder of Uber. And Garrett's insight was pretty simple. He was flying privately. He realized, wow, this isn't very efficient. There's 2 people on this airplane. I know there's other people today who are flying this very same route from Van Nuys to Aspen. So 1, we should be aggregating this demand. 2, as with charter, the service, I would say, hospitality aspect is inconsistent. And so Garrett also is very service and design forward, and said that we can really elevate what you typically find out there in the market, marry these 2 things and have something really special. And that was the genesis of Aero. So the by the seat scheduled service is foundational to what we do. It's a huge part of our business today, and I'm sure we'll get into that. Yeah. We also are a pure charter operator. Okay. So a decent portion of our business is pure on-demand charter as well.
Okay. Yeah. So then the Uber origin story here makes a lot of sense when you see this kind of fundamental truth where there's a surplus of supply and there's a demand signal, and when you can, in a business model, fascinating. So then it led to prescriptive routes and by the seat. How does that seems like a many to many, you down select into what it could be, right? And how did that come to be?
Well, so it can't exactly mirror Uber, right? And I think there was a lot of initial learning going on because, sure, there may be excess capacity out there in the fleet. There may be airplanes sitting around, but as you know, and we know that this space works a little differently than driving, right? And so ultimately the conclusion was, in order to provide the sort of level of service we want to be able to provide, to have control over the experience and everything else that you need to when running an aviation operation, we had to actually be an operator, own or control the assets ourselves. And so that was the first sort of step to building Aero what it is today. And then we based out of LA. And so looking at our tools, which are the aircraft we have, where can we go that is going to meet the needs of the sort of demo that we're looking to serve? Yeah. We're very much focused on premium leisure to start. And so there's some various obvious answers there. The first route we ever flew was Van Nuys Aspen. It is still our core to what we do. We serve Aspen year round, save for when the airport's closed, as is now, although it's just reopening, I believe. Actually, it may have reopened today. It closes every year in May. And then, there's a time during the fall where service goes down a little bit, but we serve it year round. Direct from Los Angeles. Now we serve direct from New York as well. And we're the only direct flight between New York and Aspen Airport. And as you know, Aspen is a challenging operating environment.
I was going to say, that's not an easy airport to fly into.
No, not at all. We on a nice day, Aspen keeps you on your toes. And our crew we do a day in the simulator every year just focused on Aspen. As a result, we're authorized to fly the special localizer in Aspen, which gets us in a little bit lower. We have a special balk landing procedure there. And I think it's safe to say, save for SkyWest, I don't know of any crews that operate as frequently into Aspen as Aero crews do. Which is important because if you want to do it well, you have to do it often and be very familiar with all the challenges. And another unique advantage we have there is actually when we do divert, which happens in Aspen, we can go to Rifle instead of the main airlines have to go to Grand Junction or Denver. So it started with Aspen, but then, we sort of added core leisure routes from the LA area after that, Cabo, which again is part of sort of the bread and butter one we do today, Sun Valley and others. And we've expanded now with new aircraft, but.
And did I see on your website now a Gulfstream?
Yes.
As well? Yeah, so two Embers and a Gulfstream. That's the same that's the fleet?
We have 7 aircraft today, 5 Ember Airs, 2 G4s.
Okay.
And the G4s were really added to be able to enable us to serve more long range routes. I mean, we sort of, when we think about our how we're planning where we're going to fly, we basically say, where do our guests want to go? So based out of LA, like I said, we have this premium leisure network, but then after that, where can we serve that guest? Well, New York is an obvious answer, right? It was our number 1 most requested route. So in order to serve New York, we needed a different aircraft.
This edition of What Follows is brought to you by Earhart Aeronautics. Visit the Earhart Festival tent during EAA AirVenture 2026 for complimentary educational programming, guest speakers, meet and greets, and hands-on Earhart avionics simulator experiences. Register today using the link in the show notes. So when you look at, we've talked around efficiency a little bit. We haven't talked about it directly. When you look at, commercial airlines, air transport, the economics only start to work when efficiency and the movement of aircraft and people is really optimized. And obviously that's an origin story on filling more of the seats on an aeroplane being, a privately chartered plane with 2 people sitting in the back. There's obviously the economics are very poor there right now. And how do you balance finding that efficiency, but then also, catering to, if I'm understanding it right, your aircraft are, they're brought up scale, right? In terms of the comforts, the experience from the time you go in and use your lounge. Can you kind of walk us through what that customer experience is like? And then would love to know then how do you marry that up with an efficient operation?
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I think the secret sauce to Aero is that our first job, of course, is to get people from A to B safely and efficiently. But after that, we really see ourselves as a luxury hospitality company, right? And so, our customer experience starts with our concierge who answer the phone 24/7. You're always going to get a human being, which is pretty rare in this day and age. Even for charter companies, I mean, that's a rare thing, but it's important to us. And so whether you're buying a ticket, which you can also do on aero.com, or you want to call our concierge, maybe you need to change your ticket. Maybe you'd like to book with one of our hotel partners or arrange a car. So that's kind of the entree into the Aero experience. From there, we have our own private lounge here in Los Angeles at the Van Nuys Airport, where we're able to offer sort of a different level of hospitality than you find in a typical FBO. We have food from Erewhon, juices. We serve breakfast there in the morning for the morning flights and other snacks. And you only need to arrive 20 minutes before your flight, but our guests often come a little bit earlier than that just to sort of take advantage. And then from there, you're walking, 50 yards out to your aircraft, which sits right in front of our lounge. And then once you're in the air, that hospitality experience continues. All, premium food and beverage program. We cater from Erewhon out of Los Angeles. We work with major food groups in New York, Flora Farms out of Cabo, again, to offer a really elevated hospitality experience. Our cabin attendants are trained not only as flight attendants and go through the safety training that comes with that, but also by the British Butler Institute for service. And then you land and it continues. Our concierge are available at that point, whether it's again to arrange a car, book a hotel, or book your flight home. So we really do look at how we're the hospitality experience we're providing our guests. It's really about a human experience. Yeah. That's maybe sounds a little in a day of AI, a little backward thinking, but it's really important for us in what we do at Aero.
Not only important, I would say refreshing. And again, to your point, in the world of AI, having that as such and that's that's profoundly difficult amidst all the pressures for optimizing what you're doing and for the safety of that, for the introduction of, other types of technology. Very cool.
Yeah. Well, but to your point, and this was part of your question, we're not free from the laws of aviation economics, right? And so, we need to operate in a way where our revenue per hour exceeds our cost per hour, quite frankly, right?
And at the end of the day, that is the point.
That's the name of the game. And so we obviously look to, utilization. You have to fly the airplanes a certain amount of time, spread out the fixed costs. So we obviously pay very close attention to all that. It's part of the reason why charter is a piece of the business as well. Charter complements the scheduled side of the business very nicely. It allows us to utilize the airplanes when we're not flying the scheduled service, because even for our most productive routes, Van Nuys to Aspen, that's not a route you're going to fly multiple times a day, 7 days a week out of Los Angeles with the kind of product. So what are you doing with that airplane when you're not doing it? Well, charter is a great option. So that's how we sort of skin that, cat. And it's a challenge. Always, aviation and operating is, from an economic perspective, the hardest piece to make work. But we offer something that, again, we're serving a need that isn't met right now. Right. And so on the scheduled side, we've seen a tremendous amount of demand, and it's only growing.
And then Van Nuys, that's strategically located. It's, it's a lot of consumers in the area, but also easy to get to. That airport is, you can avoid a lot of the LAX terminal. So I got to talk eVTOL for a second. That's, here in Long Beach, our hangar door is shut right now, but we're actually surrounded against air mobility. And there is sort of this push in modernizing door-to-door transport, and solving the 50-mile trip, which obviously in a jet, the economics aren't there to solve door-to-door. It's you got to get to the airport, and then you can very efficiently cover a lot longer distance. How do you see this private charter and route by the seat type of a dynamic evolving as advanced urban air mobility comes online? As we're seeing more of that. So you think that'll
yeah. Honestly, I think probably one of the first use cases for eVTOL aircraft will be to marry, an eVTOL flight with a flight on an Aero kind of product, right? So I'll give you an example. We have a lot of guests who come to Van Nuys from Santa Barbara to fly our scheduled service, and we get a lot of requests to fly out of Santa Barbara. Now, that's something that we think about, but of course, it's a smaller market. Obviously, we've got to be judicious about the way we launch new scheduled flights. Of course, an eVTOL from Santa Barbara to Van Nuys would be a perfect way to sort of solve the problem. Exactly. So I think there's, I'm personally, again, as an aviation geek, I'm very excited about the developments with eVTOL, both because we see the use case today. We have guests when we fly to Teterboro who book a helicopter for a transfer to the city to avoid that traffic, or maybe a helicopter to the Hamptons. Now, with helicopters today, there's challenges and there's limitations. There's the noise consideration, community opposition, cost, all sorts of things. To the extent that eVTOL brings down a lot of those barriers or objections, I think it's going to be fantastic. Yeah. And so that's what I'm really excited about. In addition to, I think that the new technology that's just naturally being developed as part of it, the new power plants, starting to do things electrically powered aircraft. I think that multimodal piece that you're sort of suggesting, the car to the eVTOL to the Aero, will be a great initial use case.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait for that. I mean, my personal story on this, my family, we traveled to Colorado for a fair amount, not to Aspen, but to Cripple Creek outside of Colorado Springs to go see the family. And we have tried to crack the code on every little step we can take to make that just a little bit more efficient, from what kind of car decision we make to how we travel to the airport. And the best we can still do is it's about a 9-hour door-to-door journey. And granted, 3 of those hours are because they live, my parents live way up in the mountains. It's a 3-hour drive from Denver, for example. But even still, the door-to-door. And so what I find fascinating about urban air mobility is sort of this ability to not have to divert to a hub and spoke kind of a truly optimized system, but to allow you look at Van Nuys as sort of a central point, and then the reach of that starts to come out into the surrounding area.
Well, exactly.
So then similar, so it's kind of like it takes what can be an optimized route and gives it 1,000 more nearby destinations as well.
Well, yeah, from a consumer experience and from an operator experience, because again, one of the challenges that we face operating out of Van Nuys is how do we convince that person to come up from Orange County, or even frankly from south of from the 10,
Sure.
right? And should we open up a base in Orange County to solve that problem, which would, obviously we'd be spread thinner and all the challenges that come with that. eVTOL is a great solution. Yeah. I'm excited. Now, do I think that there's challenges in deploying it in sort of the way that I think needs to happen in order for the technology ultimately be viable? Yeah, I do. But I think the best first use case, thankfully, we'll be a part of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that'll be huge. And as you're looking at, so safety, safety is one thing that at Earhart, we're always talking about it. It's one of our two core tenets of what we're setting out to do. You've been learning a lot about the desires of your consumer, and you've been able to tailor that to something that your consumers are really interested in. With that, where does the narrative of safety kind of fall into that, and have you had to have, I guess, sort of a first mover disadvantage of educating consumers on just how safe operating, that type of an aircraft on this type of a prescriptive route is? Because the statistics are very high. It's a very safe way of getting around. But does that have to be communicated at all?
No, I think it does have to be communicated. We at Aero built a safety program that I'm really proud of. We have our head of safety, Chris Malo, is one of the great safety gurus out there. He comes from the 121 world. We have programs that many 135 operators do not. We have an ASAP program. We have a fatigue risk management program. We have FOQA on all of our airplanes, which is really an incredible tool. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it basically measures, 180 parameters every second. And so we can download all of that after a flight. It's a wonderful teaching tool for our pilot corps. We can follow trends. So the first part of that is building a robust safety program, which was important to us from the outset. And then, how do you communicate that? It's not every guest that asks about safety, but it comes up often. And, frankly, a lot of people, when they talk about why they are drawn to Aero, they will tell me it's, approach to safety. And it's always a little surprising because I wonder, how did they learn that? Because sure, we have a page on our website, but I think they feel it, right? Through the professionalism of all of whether it's our pilot crew or our cabin crew, the folks on the ground, the decisions they see us make. We make the hard decisions to sometimes, if there's a mechanical issue or if the weather doesn't cooperate, that we're diverting to rifle. And I think, they see that, they feel it. And so it's kind of communicated often in a more implicit way than explicit, but it's obviously a key part of what we do.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And especially when, a lot of safety is in the decision you make, or so then they can see the attention and the care that you're putting to all the little things. It does kind of send the right message of, hey, if that kind of care and attention is going, that lends trust in, everything at large, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now to your crews, and actually you as a pilot as well, trusting in the airframe, trusting in the plane, certainly I imagine the selection of the aircraft that you're operating your fleet was based on economics. It was based on, seating capacity and all of that. But how does the experience kind of evolve over time? And I guess in terms of trusting the plane that the crew is flying, what lends that?
Well, speaking as a pilot personally and spending a lot of time with pilots, I think that the real answer some ways is time, right? So I think a pilot, they're naturally a conservative bunch, and I don't mean that politically, but they will trust something that they know. And so, when you go to our aircraft, for example, either the Embraer or the G4, these are tried and true platforms. The Embraer is a fantastic airplane with, an incredible safety record. The engines on the back of that airplane, they're Allison engines actually. Rolls-Royce bought Allison. So that's why the designator for that engine, it's a Rolls-Royce AE 3007, old Allison engines from Indiana. Wonderful. I mean, and the Rolls-Royce Tay engine on the back of the G4 is a people talk about it as bulletproof. So, ultimately with a conservative bunch of folks like pilots are, I think that trust comes often, whether it's right or wrong, from time.
Hey, I'll trust him.
Yeah, it's got to prove itself to me.
Exactly.
A little bit. Right. And I think that there's two kinds of technology out there that come into aircraft. There's what's sort of additive in that it's not necessarily replacing something. And I think pilots are generally more receptive to things like that. I'll give you an example of, NEXRAD weather came in addition to radar, right? It didn't replace radar in the commercial cockpit. Sure. And those are two different tools that you use for different things. One's more tactical and one's more strategic, right? And I fly with one of the great things we were able to do at Aero, of course, is hire retired airline pilots because we're not beholden to the 65-year-old retirement age, which is a real advantage we have because we have wonderful teachers and mentors and the most experienced pilots out there. But I'll watch them with, for flying around weather and, I'm looking at radar and my iPad, which has the NEXRAD, and they're just poo-pooing the NEXRAD, right? So that's the additive. And then there's what technology that replaces. And I think that's where with pilots, you're always going to have an initial degree of skepticism because is it proven? Because what it's replacing is. Right. Now, it may not be it may be older technology. It may not be good, but it has proven itself in a way. And so that's what I see a lot in the cockpit and having these discussions about new technology is sort of the tension.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I, as a hobby, one thing I've noticed.
Can I buy one from you?
Would love to chat. And one thing I've noticed anytime you get under the hood and you work on one of these things and you spend time working on something, you kind of sit down behind the wheel and like, okay, how do I feel about this vehicle right now? Is there confidence is there? But then the first chance it has to act up, something did not go right. You just sit there, you turn on the radio and like, okay, but now I don't trust you anymore.
Yeah, right.
You get, that's it. And it takes a few days or hours or, however long to build up that trust again. And when you break that trust, it goes away pretty fast in the system, and now that makes sense. The track record is obviously, we talked a little bit about in aviation, and we talked about eVTOL. We hinted at AI. We've kind of talked around automation. Just you personally, what's anything catching your mind as something that's kind of exciting for you or something that you're excited to see play out? I mean,
I'm excited and maybe I differ from other pilots in this. I'm excited for more automation in the cockpit where that is designed with the human in mind, right? So that where there's still, and I'm not saying long-term, but at least now, there's a human in the loop. I think there's a lot of opportunities still, especially in commercial aircraft, which in some ways are behind what's going on in the GA fleet for more automation that reduces pilot workload, makes things safer, but still ultimately you've got a human pilot in control. So can't wait for some of the stuff that you guys are working on to make its way into a commercial cockpit. We already talked about eVTOL. I'm really excited about the future of new power plants for aircraft. We know that what we do flying airplanes is energy intensive. Right now, the only way we can find a way to do it is with dinosaur bones, but long term, it will be great to find an alternative. I know it's probably a long time away before a transatlantic flight happens with anything, at least that's not partially powered by fossil fuel. But I think that everything we're seeing in the eVTOL world, even though that's maybe not directly for transport fixed wing aircraft, will translate in time. And so that's really exciting for me. And then, as an aviation geek, I obviously keep one eye on the hypersonic stuff. I'd like that in my lifetime.
Yeah, very cool. Our co-founder, Kita, his fiance is actually over at Hermes. And they just did Mach 1.2, I think yesterday, the day before.
Yeah.
And when you see the development that's going on there, the world of aviation is just fascinating. Yeah.
There is. And there's a lot of really exciting, we are living in a time where there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. So I do feel lucky in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be great to see how this plays out. I'm excited to see where Aero will be amidst all of this as well. Now I want to swing by Van Nuys and see if there's a route that makes sense.
You're welcome.
Next time I go to Colorado.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to show you around. So please do come visit.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for taking the time to come down to Long Beach and,
Thank you, Nate. It was fun.